When my mother passed away, my father basically decided that he didn't want us to have any contact with my aunts and uncles. And that's why he picked us up and he took us from California to Minnesota and put us in foster care. Having met my Korean family, I have an amazing relationship with my adoptive family, and I'm so grateful to them. And, they come to Israel and they're such a part of my kids' lives. And, they've accepted my conversion and they've seen all the sides of me.
Nomi was adopted and had a happy childhood. But no, she wasn't adopted by Jewish parents, and her biological parents weren't Jewish either. So how did this Korean model find herself living an Orthodox Jewish life in Rechavia, Israel? This is a story about the search for emes, the truth, and the journey toward true self-acceptance. Stay tuned. You'll hear more about these great sponsors throughout the episode, from Twillery, my favorite clothing brand. They're having a huge sale right now. And are you dreaming of an Israel apartment? Well, at TheDreamRaffle.com with the code that we're going to give you, you might actually win it. Also, mark your calendars for November 17th at 12:45. You'll hear and see so much more about Touro, the incredible school. And of course, for smart business solutions, the software from the future could be yours with our friends at BitBean. Oh, also, do you want to be interviewed? Well, for the very first time ever, we're opening our studio to everyone. You'll hear more about this at the end of the episode. Here we go. I'm Yaakov Langer, and you're listening to Inspiration for the Nation. Nomi, thank you so much for doing this. There's a trillion questions I have for you. Could you start us from the beginning, maybe even like before you were born?
I'll take it all the way back to 1950. That's when my mother was born in Seoul, in South Korea. This was something that I knew, but I didn't actually I didn't have a lot of details because I was born in 1982. And when I was 2 years old, my mother passed away. And my father, they'd been married for a number of years at the time. He went back to stay with his family after my mother died. It was very difficult for him. My grandmother was old, his mother. And so he put us into foster care. And I have a biological brother when I say us. He is actually less than a year younger than me. He's 11 months and 3 weeks. And we went to live with this family on a farm, my earliest memories are of this dog biting my brother and chasing little chickens around the farm, and really something that seems almost out of a movie considering the life that I live today. So after 2.5 years, my father picked us up and he used to come and visit us. And I just sort of knew, this was just matter of fact. Kids accept what's there. They don't have any other reference. And so I lived with his family. My father would come visit us. He would come visit us with his girlfriend. And one day they picked us up and they brought us to another family. I don't know if I remember this, but I've been told this story so many times by my adoptive parents that I think it's a memory. But I jumped out of the car and I ran over to my adoptive father, my dad, and I said, "You're my new daddy." And I just jumped into his arms. And my old father, my biological father, standing there, and his girlfriend and my new mother. My brother, I remember he was much more shy, and still personality-wise, that was just our two personalities. I went on from the age of 4.5, just having this really idyllic Midwestern childhood. Going to the lake, going to the cabin, riding our bike around the neighborhood, playing in the stream next to our house, in Minnesota, just this really idyllic, typical Midwestern lifestyle. I was raised Catholic. My adoptive family's Catholic. The one thing I can say about my adoptive family and all of our relatives, my mother comes from a big family. My mother has 5 siblings. My father has 3. There was this total acceptance. We would spend every other weekend together, one family, drive up at least once a month, few hours, see cousins, see uncles. It was a really stereotypical happy childhood. And I knew I was adopted, and I knew I was Korean, and it was just sort of matter of fact. In fact, I remember actually in 5th grade, a kid on the bus was teasing me about being adopted. And I was like, my parents had told me how to deal with this as if it ever happened. And I said something like, "Well, I was chosen. Your parents got stuck with you." And I was quite proud of the fact that I was adopted. It was so matter of fact. When I was about 17, things shifted, I would say in my teenage years, and really having a hard time with my adoptive family. And this was the 90s. So obviously nobody was sending me off to talk about my feelings or EMDR or to process anything or to really dig deeper into what was going on. And after some hard times, I ended up moving out, and I moved in with a Jewish family who was the family of a good friend of mine from school. I'd always grown up with Jewish friends, and I'd gone to bar and bat mitzvahs of my friends. In Minneapolis and Minnesota, there happens to be quite a large Reform and conservative population. I didn't really know anything about the Orthodox population. So when I moved in with this family, it was just a much more intimate look at Jewish life. Even though they weren't Orthodox, it was just a much more in-person sort of what's happening. I remember the grandmother was a Holocaust survivor, and she would come over on Friday night, and she would put on her doily, and she would light Shabbos candles, and we'd have a meal together. And I remember the first time, I was only there for maybe a couple months, but we went actually on Rosh Hashanah, and they said, we're going to go do Tashlich. And I was like, okay, let's go into the stream. Not like everybody in Minnesota has a stream behind their house, but they also had a stream behind their house. So we went over to the stream and we're tossing bread in and they're reading from a book. And I'm like, this is so weird, but just go along with it. It was a really nice, warm place to be. And I was still in touch with my adoptive family. And then I went to university, went to the University of Minnesota. And I had 2 jobs when I was in university. So I was a waitress, a really bad one. And I'm a little forgetful. And I was also doing on the side Marshall Fields, which is, do you remember Marshall Fields? No. It's like old school. It is, I would say, it's like Bloomingdale's in the Midwest in like the 80s, 90s, maybe 2000s. And Target. It was owned by Target.
That
So
I know Target.
Target's the best. So they would shoot their catalogs. And I got a job through a modeling agency. And I would come in and I'd wear the Halloween costume or I'd wear the sweater and, hold the back to school supplies. And I would be in the Sunday circular. It was a great way to make money. It was really good pay. It definitely paid way better than waitressing, especially since I wasn't getting many tips because I wasn't a good waitress. And then one day my agency called me and they said, you know what, there's a woman here scouting for Asia and you're half Korean. So why don't you come in? So I met with this woman, maybe 5-minute meeting. She says, okay, great. In 2 weeks, I'm sending you to Asia. Don't cut your hair. Okay. I asked no questions. I just was basically like, okay, I guess I'm going. I think today I would never recommend somebody doing that. This was 2001, maybe. So it was a different world. Today, I think you'd end up like, I don't know, human trafficking. Like it just wouldn't be, you wouldn't do that. So a couple weeks later, I'm on a plane. I land in Hong Kong. Somebody picks me up at the airport. I know nothing. I have been on a plane once before to Europe, once maybe to Florida. I've never traveled to Asia. I had no really interest in it.
Do you speak the language or?
No.
Oh, okay.
Well, the nice thing about Hong Kong at that point, it was right after the handover back to China, but it was a British colony for so many years. So everybody speaks English. But it's an overwhelming city. Their lights are bright. I remember getting in the evening and there's this escalator that takes you from the bottom of the city all the way up to the top because the whole city is built on a mountain. And I remember like being there and just like, I didn't even know what to think. I was just completely, from Minnesota to this completely different atmosphere and really out of my element. So I get there and right away I start working. I'm modeling for Elle and I got a very big campaign in Korea for Vidal Sassoon. So they flew me to Korea and then they flew me to Thailand for Biore or for Johnson & Johnson. And I did a Shiseido thing and I was working nonstop and it was great money and it was a lot of fun. And it was, for a girl from Minnesota, I never thought that this would be where I would end up. But I didn't really enjoy it. I would say the main thing, honestly, and at that point, maybe things have changed today, but the main thing was my weight. Which I wasn't overweight, but I was considered like not a desirable weight for the industry there. And it was constantly commented on. And I wasn't like a tough, thick-skinned kind of girl that I could just let it roll off. And I was so young. And I remember just like hating the comments. At some point, I remember I met who later becomes, spoiler alert.
Oh gosh, now we know.
My husband. So we were just friends. We met, friendly. I was young. I wasn't at all thinking about marriage. I wasn't all thinking about like long-term relationships. I was just thinking about like, what's my job next week? What country am I flying to? Did my agency get my visa? Those were the kind of details. And we were friends for a while and we would meet sometimes after work for a coffee. And eventually one day he says to me, I'm Jewish. And I just responded very casually, well, I'm going to convert someday. And he says, I'm Sephardi. I don't believe in conversion. And I was like, okay. Like, I don't think at that point I even knew the difference between Ashkenazi and Sephardi. I knew that his family was from Morocco, but I don't think I knew the cultural differences. We kept hanging out. And then finally one day he calls me up. He says, do you want to go out to dinner tonight? And that day I was actually shooting a Carlsberg commercial. I remember saying when I was on set, oh, you know what? This guy that I'm friends with wants to go out to dinner tonight. It's like kind of a date. I think it's a date. I don't know if I really want to go. And the guy, one of the extras on set said, well, who is it? And the Hong Kong community is small. And I said, oh, it's this guy, William. And he said, does he go to this gym? And I was like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's his gym. He's like, you know what? He's a really nice guy. Like, I was like, yeah, I know him. We're friends. He's like, no, but you should go on the date. And so we went on that date.
This guy better have gotten shot on this. That's what I'm saying.
So we went on that date and things just sort of picked up from there. And we didn't even really know where we were going. But I remember, like, for example, I remember he once visited me on set and the director noticed our chemistry and said, you know what? Why don't you play the guy that's supposed to be dancing with her in this scene? And a few months later, we were at the movie theater and we saw ourselves up on the screen. And it was just like so much fun. And we were having such a good time. And I gradually started thinking, I started reading a little bit more about Judaism. And I read an Elie Wiesel book that really touched me. And I read a book, I don't even know what book it was. It was about Shabbos. But it really just, I loved the idea of Shabbos. And so eventually I spoke to the rabbi in Hong Kong. And I said to him, I think maybe I'm interested in converting. And he gave me great advice. And he said, you can do a conversion here in Hong Kong and Chabad can facilitate it. But really, if you want to have an Orthodox conversion and really understand Jewish culture and life, you should move to a big community. And that's what I did. Picked up and told my agency, I'm going to go for a bit. And I picked up and moved to Los Angeles. And I moved there because the rabbi in Hong Kong, he kind of recommended some people that he knew that I could be in touch with. And also because I was like, well, if I decide not to do this conversion, LA is the modeling acting world. I can go back and do that. So I moved to Los Angeles. Actually, I had an acting coach in LA. This is also kind of old school. Do you know Laverne and Shirley?
No.
The
only Shirley I know
Penny
is
Marshall. Penny Marshall. So she was...
J.C. Penney.
Not even around.
I don't know.
So
what's Penny Marshall?
Penny Marshall is...
Who's Penny Marshall? I don't know.
Yeah, she was my acting coach. So she's Jerry Marshall's sister. And he was the director of Pretty Woman and a lot of big movies.
Okay,
anyway, she was my acting coach. And I remember going to these classes with her. And one day she called me in after class and she says, there's something like you're just stuck. And I feel like you're not really committed to this. And I remember having this conversation with her and it kind of made me examine like, where am I I need to make a decision. I'm either doing this conversion like full-heartedly, which I'd really at that point, that's where my heart was, or I'm going to be in this acting world, but I did not feel at all like I could do both. Like I knew that at that point. I made the decision, then and there. I said, really, I feel like what's the next right move for me? And I think that's kind of my guiding principle in life is like when you don't know what to do, like what's the next right move? What is the next most correct step? And I really felt like just committing to my spiritual side was the next thing that I wanted to do. And a little backstory also, in Hong Kong, I'd spent time, I'd started studying yoga under a Swami, and I definitely had this spiritual calling, and I didn't have a framework for it. And so once I clicked into that framework, I felt like this is exactly where I want to be. And after that, I just flew. Like I went to the Basin and I applied to do my Orthodox conversion, and I read all the books and I went to all the meetings and I got a tutor and I started learning and I loved it. And during this time, my then boyfriend, my husband today, he's living in Hong Kong. And every time he would come visit me, I'm like more religious.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. So he'd come and I'd be like, now I'm wearing skirts. And then he'd come again and now I'm wearing long sleeves. And then he'd come again. And then he started spending more time in Los Angeles. And I was learning and he was learning. And I went to learn Hebrew. And I have so many fond memories of the Los Angeles community because it was such a great place to become from. It was just really a balanced perspective. I got to meet all kinds of people. And after a year and a half, I finished my conversion. And 3 months later, we got married. Then we moved to Jerusalem 5 months later. And then I basically spent the next, I would say, 2005 until last year. This is 2023?
We're in
2024.
2024.
2024.
Wrong year. That's almost 20 years.
So I spent 18 years just doing the full-time mom thing. I was working at one point in a school with girls. Some of my students today have kids. I'm actually staying by one of my students. It's amazing to see everybody all grown up and with houses and babies of their own. About 10 years ago, I got interested in sort of maybe understanding a little bit more about my background. I'd put a lot of it when I became religious. everything kind of flowed from the point that I became Jewish. And, my marriage and kids and moving to Israel and everything just flowed. But I didn't really stop ever and sort of examine, like, what was this that I went through at the end of high school? What did my adoption and what I'd gone through at the beginning of my life mean to me, and how it had affected me? And so 10 years ago, I actually got in touch with my father.
Mm.
And I had actually already been in touch with him about 20 years previously. And we'd had a 1-hour meeting where he'd given me, for the first time ever, a album full of baby photos.
Ooh.
And I'd never seen a picture of myself except from I had one picture from when I was 2, when we were in foster care. And then I had another picture when I was maybe right before we moved in with my parents. Those were my only references to those early years. And I look at this album, and even when this happened the first time when I met my father was when I was living in Hong Kong. I had come back to meet him. I saw in this album, like, oh, I have a lot of family. I see me with cousins, like kids my own age, clearly Korean. I see my mother. I see my father. It was the first time I'd ever seen a picture of my mother was when I was 20. And then I kind of had put everything back and like put it aside and embarked on this journey in my conversion and not really delved into it. So 10 years ago, I called my father and I was like, what's with these pictures? And who are these people? And I need to understand more. And he said, your mother had family, and I think they came over from Korea, and she had a bunch of siblings, and she lost some siblings and in the war, and it was very vague. And I wasn't ready to go there yet. And so I, once again, kind of just closed up the box and went back to my Jerusalem life and running to the shuk and taking my kids to school. And then about 5 years ago, I went to therapy. I think that was really like the turning point where, you get to an age where you're like, I want to understand all parts of myself, and whatever I'm going to accomplish in my life, I'm going to need all the parts of myself to accomplish it.
Mm.
So I'm going to have to go and do some digging. So I went to therapy for about 3 or 4 years before I finally got the courage to take a DNA test. And really what was the catalyst was my friend Ruth, who converted, and she's Korean. And she happened to mention that her last name is Cho. And I said, well, I'm also Cho. I knew that from my mother. So she said, well, we're like, wouldn't that be crazy? Like, wouldn't that be like, it would be like a story we'd be telling here. Like, oh, we're actually family. So
My long lost sister.
So she went and got me this 23andMe DNA test. And I got it. And I stuck it on the shelf. Again, I was like, I'm not ready to go there. A little bit more therapy. A year and a bit, I saw the DNA test as I was packing for a work trip. And I said, you know what, I'll take it. And I'll mail it in when I'm there. So you spit in the tube, put everything together, you mail it in. I didn't even think about it. And really, when I mailed it in, I really wasn't at all anticipating finding family. Like, that wasn't even in my head. I was actually kind of hoping for some sort of confirmation that maybe I'm a little bit Ashkenazi. There's always this need to sort of explain things, right? As humans, like, we want to explain things. And I wanted to understand, like, my spiritual journey and why I'd chosen to raise my kids this way and why it felt really right. I'm sitting at work 2 weeks later. I open up my email and I see, okay, here's my genetics. Like, oh, you're 50.1% Korean, which I was like, oh, that's cool. I'm more Korean than anything else. And then I find out I'd always thought I was English, but actually on my father's side, I'm Norwegian. Mostly Norwegian and a little bit of English and a little bit of Italian, like just enough to make me feel really good about myself because I love Italy. And it says you have connections. And so first I click on my father's side and it's like 4th generation cousins. You're like, okay, I'll never meet these people. Like, we probably won't have anything in common. And I click on my mother's side and I have 2 cousins, first cousins, and they're coming from the family tree is showing me that they're coming from 2 different parents. So I was like, wait a minute. Like, is this, like, my heart was racing. I'm like, does this mean what I think it means? Like, that's too easy. Like, it can't possibly be this easy after 30 some years. And so it says they're open to connection. So I have a male cousin and a female cousin. I email my female cousin. And within, I don't know, maybe 6 hours, I get a message back. And she says, we need to talk.
Oh. Okay, that's enough for your episode. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, I have to get going.
Yeah. Okay, no, it's getting it. Oh, the whole time you're talking, I'm like, I do not know what the next step is going to be here. Okay, yeah. We need to talk. That's big.
Yeah.
Okay.
You never want to hear that. But this time, it was honestly the best thing.
We'll be right back to this week's episode. And It's getting juicy. But first, I have to tell you about Twillery, my absolute favorite brand for men's clothing. With the holiday season approaching very soon, they are running a huge flash sale with select products up to 50% off. Their polos, already the most comfortable out there, are now at an unbeatable price, or you could get $30 off their blazers, which I'm wearing right now, which I love. Whether it's their soft polos, durable pants, or incredible suits, Twillery is all about the quality that lasts. I've had clothes from them for over 6 years and still looking sharp and going strong with no pilling and totally machine washable. And as a bonus for my listeners, Twillery is offering $18 off your first order. Head over to Twillery.com, use the code word INSPIRE, and you'll get $18 off. And you'll also tap into all their incredible sales going on right now. Now, before we dive back in, I want you to imagine this. A company came to BitBean frustrated by a software project gone haywire. They'd outsourced their development, but constant bugs, miscommunication, and shifting priorities kept stalling their progress. BitBean stepped in and tackled it with a multi-tiered approach. They started by digging into the code to pinpoint exactly the inefficiencies, addressing issues at the core. Then, BitBean set up a clear communication process so everyone stayed in sync, no more guesswork, just organized updates and timelines. They focused first on the company's urgent needs, like regulatory requirements, to deliver quick wins, and at the same time, they worked on optimizing the platform for long-term stability. BitBean transformed a chaotic project into an efficient, reliable system that laid a foundation for real growth. I promise you're not as far away as you think with having a really smart system tailored for your company. Call our friends at BitBean for a free consultation, and you'll see why they are the most trusted software company in the Jewish world, and frankly, highly rated in the entire world. Now back to this week's episode.
So we get on the phone and she says, "Do you have a brother named Justin?" I said, "Yeah, I have a brother named Justin." And she starts crying. And then I start crying because we both know what this means. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, like your mother, we talk about her. We have a picture of her in our house. You have to talk to my father, but he's on the road right now. You have to talk to him. Oh my gosh, like we're just both in awe." And so we kind of just do this like quick catch up. Within 48 hours, I'm on a Zoom call with my entire family, my entire Korean family. So I have 3 uncles, an aunt, and 10 cousins. And they didn't know we were adopted. They had looked for us under my father's name. My English name is Jessica. So they looked under with my, under my English name with my father's last name. When Facebook came out, at one point they'd hired a private investigator and he kind of disappeared with their money. It was someone they hired, I think on the internet they mentioned. And they also, my uncles were worried. They said that we were so young when my mother passed away and we kind of disappeared from their lives that perhaps we didn't even know the whole story. Maybe we were being raised with my father and his new family and we thought they were our family, and they were also scared to sort of disrupt things. And so we had this great meeting, and a couple months later, I flew in by myself to meet everybody. And I had cousins that flew in from Austin with their kids. Everybody flew into Los Angeles, which is where my family was living at that point. That's also where my mother had passed away. And I learned everything that I thought. I had always thought that my mother was this immigrant that came over from Korea and she had like a very hard life and then she died. And it was just this like sad story. And then I find out that my mother was like this powerhouse hustler. She had this amazing story, and really that's where it goes back to like 1950 is she was born in 1950 at the beginning of the Korean War. When she was 10 years old, her father passed away and she was the oldest. 3 of the babies above her had died. There was a famine in Korea prior, and it was very common that babies didn't survive, there's a custom actually in Korea, the 100-day celebration, where you celebrate after a baby survived 100 days because it was so rare in those days. So my mother was the first to survive. And she became, in her teens, like she was helping out with the kids and helping out bring in money. And when she was in her 20s, she met a GI, American soldier who was stationed in Korea. She married him and she moved to the States. And my aunts told me, when my aunt, I have one aunt, she said that, when your mother would eat a good meal and she would write us a letter saying, I ate a good meal and I'm thinking of you and I'm going to find a way to get you here. And she eventually managed to bring over my grandmother, my 3 uncles, and my aunt. And they all moved in together into an apartment. And they worked together and they saved their money together. And then they bought a house. And then they bought a convenience store. And they were just this very cohesive family unit. And when I heard this and how hard they worked together, it really reminded me so much of like survivors after the Holocaust and like just coming together and everybody just like these families making it work in very difficult circumstances. then my mother met my father. She got divorced from the GI, and she met my father. And, this is where I still don't, my aunts and uncles don't know what was going on in my mother's marriage. And, my father hasn't really said a lot, or does he remember a lot? I don't know. But when my mother passed away, my father basically decided that he didn't want us to have any contact with my aunts and uncles. And that's why he picked us up and he took us from California to Minnesota and put us in foster care. And, I think having met my Korean family, like they're so I have an amazing relationship with my adoptive family, and I'm so grateful to them. And, they come to Israel and they're such a part of my kids' lives. And, they've accepted my conversion and they've seen all the sides of me. And then you meet like this biological family, and I think we have a similar sense of humor. And they told me I remind them of my mother, which was like something that made me so happy. You want roots. Like I didn't realize how much I wanted roots. Every time I'd sort of taken the story and put it back into a box, it was really just this fear because I didn't know I was going to get this warm, supportive family that had been looking for me. I think every adoptee has this fear. You could look for your adoptive family and you could even find out crazy things and it could be really uncentering, or you could get rejected all over again. And I think that there's so much about, being a convert and being adopted and then being an immigrant living in Israel and being there 20 years and not speaking great Hebrew. And you always feel a bit unrooted. And then I meet this whole group of people, and it was so centering and it was so validating to who I was. And they were just such positive people and so warm and accepting. And there is a part of me, I think, that, is sad that I wasn't like raised with my cousins and raised with my Korean culture. They really had such a close and rich culture. So we kept in touch and we had a great time. My cousins and I spent this week together. We would hang out with our, in the daytime, and then the nighttime we'd go out and I'd make them like listen to Taylor Swift, and like they would give me soju, which is like this Korean type of alcohol that I'm pretty sure I never ever need to drink again. Alcohol, I'm not such a thing for me. But we had a lot of fun. And then this last year, I actually brought my whole family to Los Angeles and we had another reunion. And once again, everybody flew in with their kids, and my adoptive parents also flew in. Well, the first time I met, my brother also came in. He met them. We spent that week together. And then this time my brother also came in with my adoptive parents. And we had this great week again. And there's such a warmth and there's so much to say about nature versus nurture and comfort and just like hitting it off. And they were so accepting of like my Jewish life and accommodating with my kashrus. I was like, okay, so we're going to make food, right, at my uncle's house, but we're going to need a lot of tinfoil, like the double wrapping.
Right, yeah.
And I'm like thinking about how like environmentally conscious California people are. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to wrap this in another layer before I throw it in the oven. My cousins actually went to Costco and Trader Joe's and they bought like everything they could find with an OU symbol. So my kids ate like kilos of Oreos. I was like, I'm a nutritionist. I do clinical nutrition. We talk about it, but it was love. They wanted to feed me. They wanted to feed us Korean, and they wanted, food is love, and they couldn't. So I just think that at the end of the day, like this whole story with my family turned out to be really the best possible outcome, and it feels so integrated and it feels so validating. And for the first time after so many years, like having roots is something that I never knew I would have, and I'd kind of settled into like not having them, and it's been just such a centering process, and I feel like it's still developing. Like the relationship with my family is still there, with my adoptive family, with my biological family, with my kids are hanging out with their cousins, tech and doing FaceTime with their second cousins because they had such a great time playing together, and we've kind of expanded our lives.
That's wild. I'm curious to like, why were you so scared to see about your past? Was it like this? And I don't know, maybe like someone who was adopted, like was this fear of like rejection there that you were so worried about like encountering something
So I think
scary?
that's, to be really vulnerable is, I think I always have a fear of rejection. I think that if you are adopted, and especially with my circumstances where like as a child, I knew that my father had chosen his girlfriend and married her. He actually married her a year before I even got out of foster care, and they had her kids. And I knew this as a kid. So I think that it was the idea that I couldn't get rejected again.
Mm.
And I think that for me in the Jewish community, acceptance was so important. And in fact, there was one point where something happened that felt like I felt very rejected. And I remember how unsettling that was.
Mm.
And at the time, it really made me think about how seriously I took rejection and like, was I accepting of myself? Because I could constantly be defined by external rejection. Like that's part of life. And it could really hit me hard. And that's when I got more comfortable with like, I really have to get to the bottom of this, because if I'm going to be an emotionally strong, resilient person and I don't deal with everything and understand this, then that fear of rejection is subconsciously going to drive a lot of my decisions. I also saw a friend who was also adopted go through living a traditional Orthodox life, and I remember when she discovered her family and I watched her change everything and, like move to a different community and get divorced. And I felt very much that before I figured out everything and learned everything, that I had to know so clearly who I was that nothing was going to shake me, because the most important thing to me is being a mother and being that stable presence for my kids. I didn't ever want to be feeling that level of like, is this the right choice? I wanted to really understand all my choices and then go and say, okay, how does this fit in?
I want to go back to your friend Ruth.
Yeah.
Because your name is Nomi and Russ, and you guys are both, you said your names are Cho and both converts, and
we're not siblings.
I know that, but like what
She's
is it?
awesome.
But like you didn't say like, oh, my friend who goes by Rachel now, like or Sarah, like it's Ruth, Russ. I don't know. That's very cool over there. Maybe I'll interview her. I don't know.
She's great. You should.
What was it like for you living in Israel? Like, I think in general, someone moving from America to Israel is not so
That's a
easy.
great question, yeah.
And then someone with your life going there, like, and the way you look also, like, I don't know how many people looking like you are in Israel. Like, was that harder than usual?
That's a great question. So I'll say that before I moved to Israel, somebody did me a favor. I was going to move to a very specific Orthodox community because by the time I'd finished my conversion, I was like yeshivish or bust. Like,
Right.
that's all I wanted.
Right.
When you do an Orthodox conversion, you're not told like there's Date Lumi and there's modern Orthodox. You're kind of given like this one line. And if you're changing your life, you're a striving individual. And maybe you have like a high level of perfectionism in you and you're going like for whatever they tell you, you're black and white. And we were going to move to this one very specific community that seemed to fit like this very yeshivish lifestyle that I thought I wanted. And thank God my friend's father, my friend Bina from Los Angeles, her father invited us over. They invited us for Shabbos. And he was like, you should move to Rehavia. Like, you should not move to that other community. You should move to Rehavia. It just happened to be, there's so much hashgacha pratis in my life where like, I'm not a thinker. I'm not a ruminator. I very much go with my gut, but I do read the signs. And a few weeks later after our wedding, we had gone to Hong Kong for my husband's business. And I was in the JCC and I met this girl and she was like, I live in Rehavia. And I was like, oh yeah, this guy just told us to move there. She's like, well, here's my real estate agent. So like, as soon as we moved there, that was like the one phone number I had was this real estate agent. And that was Rehavia's been, my community in Rehavia has been extremely accepting. I never felt from my friends and peers there like I was any different. Mm-hmm. I do remember at some point wanting so badly. There was a big part of my life living in Jerusalem and Israel at the beginning of my marriage and at the maybe even the first 10 to 12 years where all I wanted to do was be like a Beis Yaakov girl. Like I just wanted to blend in and I just wanted to use like the yeshivish vocabulary, and I very much wanted to be exactly like everybody else. I wanted to be able to walk into a room in Ramat Eshkol or in any yeshivish community and not stand out. And even I remember once the taxi driver said to me, like, you look a little Asian. And I was like, I don't have time for this. I don't have the emotional energy for this story today in this taxi. I was like, I'm Russian. Because I was like, they're exotic looking. There was times when I just wasn't ready to own it, But I will say that in Israel, I feel very, very comfortable, very accepted. And it's also because I live in a very kind of mixed and open community.
That's really amazing. From your experience, like I know you go around and you speak, and at this point, if someone wants to reach out to you or your manager to speak, where should they go? So and we'll put on the link in the show notes, but you could say it for those listening.
So they can contact me at Nomi Knows Nutrition. I'm a clinical nutritionist. That's my day job.
We'll get into nutrition also. Don't worry. Yeah.
And they can contact me through there. And I do speaking, and that's what I'm here for now. I flew from Israel. I've told this story before. And I remember one time somebody saying to me, like, can you tape it? And I said, my story is about connection, not curiosity. Like, it's an interesting story, and there's a lot going on in there. But
it's an interesting story.
It's an interesting story.
I've done a bunch of things. It's an interesting story. Yeah.
I said, but it's really about connection. I feel very much like when I reflect back on just the last couple of years or the last 20 years or the last 40 years, is so much like it's about coming connected to myself, connected to Hashem and having like this higher spiritual relationship, connected to a community, connected to roots somewhere. I felt so rootless for so many years. You're adopted and then you're, and then you convert and you don't even have a Masorah. So you're following your husband's Masorah, but like you don't have your own minhagim. You
and
don't
even
have
your husband,
own.
He doesn't have, he wasn't Orthodox before. So his
Right.
Masorah, he's not.
He has like his Sephardi,
Right.
He has like his Moroccan roots, but you don't have like this very strong thing to lean on. The whole process is just connected me more and more to myself. And it's been very validating also to meet my family and to see like who they are and to realize like, they're really nice, generous people. And I'd like to think that I get those qualities, that I also have those qualities. Before I was always like, am I nice because I'm a people pleaser because of my trauma? Like I used to kind of look at my life through that. Like you kind of question yourself when you don't know your story, you don't know your background. And like all of a sudden I'm like, no, I'm nice because actually like it's actually in my genes. Even things like, my aunt told me that my mother used to buy like really nice things. I'm wearing her ring. My aunt gave me my mother's ring. And they were immigrants. And so it was a lot to spend money on like fancy things. And my aunt said that one time my mother bought a Dior scarf and they couldn't understand, like, how can you spend so much money on a little piece of material? And I was like, I'm like that.
Yeah.
I like pretty things. I'll spend too much money on pretty things. And I was like, oh, I always thought it was like, because I, grew up in the Midwest and then I went to Hong Kong and I had to like get into fashion and that and I didn't know how to manage it. And so now but no, it's like there's things that are in you and they have this like origin and they tie you back to who you are and they're little quirks. And I appreciate so much myself more like just understanding where I come from.
It's really interesting because I think everyone has to go through this journey and you kind of probably were like forced in ways to like really handle it and handle it in a way that like everyone in your life could kind of see you going through this process. But like, it's interesting because you're the whole time looking for your roots and really acceptance from everyone around you. But ultimately, if you had to write a book report about you, like, is it you versus or getting acceptance from everyone else or like you getting acceptance from yourself? Like that's
100%.
the root of it,
100%. I think that you can only do your tafkid, whatever you were meant to do in life, if you have all the tools. And you don't have all your tools if you're really ignoring, denying, or trying to stifle a big part of yourself. And for so many years, listen, I'm not your typical Beis Yaakov girl. Yes, my kids go to very typical Israeli frum institutions. At the end of the day, like I'm always going to be different. And I never wanted to be different. I felt like it was like a blemish. And listen, maybe it's also in my 40s and, women have, we have that place where we just become much more comfortable with ourselves. But I got to the point where I realized I'm not going to be able to reach the level that I want to reach in my relationships professionally, in my relationships, even with my kids, the deepness that I want to have with my kids, if I continue to deny parts of myself, because subconsciously I will always be driven by things that I don't even understand.
We'll be right back this week's episode. But first, let's talk about how you can win a free apartment for keeps in Israel with the ultimate giveaway, the Dream Raffle. Thank you for being here, Rav Shmuel.
First of all, hello, everybody. This has been a year since we've been on Living L'Chaim. And by the way, I'm watching all your amazing episodes. And I'm not just saying that, I really am. And yasher koach to you and all the wonderful work that you do. Yes, this is the 7th year of the Dream Raffle, where we raffle off an apartment, a luxury apartment for you to own in your name forever in the heart of Yerushalayim. This year we have a brand new apartment. When I say brand new, it's being built right now. It will be finished by the end of Hanukkah, and it'll go from the builder directly to the winner of the Dream Raffle. Brand new, worth well over $1 million in the heart of Yerushalayim, an absolutely beautiful apartment. And the winner gets to keep this apartment forever.
So where does the money go towards?
Every year we focus on a different cause. This year, it's to help primarily the residents of the north of Israel. Last year, we were helping the Otef Aza, the Gaza envelope area. This year, we're helping the farmers, the yeshivot, the communities in northern Israel, whether it's Kiryat Shmona or Metula or the Golan Heights or a place called Nitu'ah, where all the people there are farmers. They have been living out of their homes for over a year. Now, if you live out of your home for a year and you can work on Zoom, okay, it's not comfortable, but you can survive. How can you live out of your home for a year and continue being a farmer? You can't do that. So we're helping these communities, we're helping these farmers. The money from the Dream Raffle keeps these people going, keeps them motivated, because when they get back, they're going to need to replant and re-energize their farms, their communities, their businesses. We're helping yeshivot, whether it's in the Golan Heights, the yeshiva in Akko, Nahariya, Kiryat Shmona. Torah needs to continue, and the funds from the Dream Raffle this year will help communities, businesses, and yeshivot in Israel's northern border.
How does one enter, and can you please give the Inspiration listeners a nice discount?
All right, because you asked so nicely, here's what I'm going to do. It's very simple. It's called TheDreamRaffle.com. Remember that word the, because somebody else chopped it without the word the. So TheDreamRaffle.com is our website. All the information is there. And you see that we're offering now a buy one, get one free. So we're doubling your order. And also every single order gets a pasuk in a Sefer Torah that we're writing for an IDF base. And also we have a bonus raffle of $12,000, so you can win that and use that money to furnish the new apartment. So all this, and for Living L'Chaim listeners, a coupon code of LL, whatever, here it is, LL, and Living L'Chaim gets you $10 off. So it's an incredible deal. The money goes to really a very serious cause, the Israeli, wonderful heroes in Israel's northern border, and you could win a brand new apartment. No one's ever lived there before. They're literally putting on the finishing touches now as we speak. The keys will go from the Kablan, the builder, to the winner of the Dream Raffle, year number 7.
You know what? I have a feeling a L'Chaim listener will win this year.
That'll be great. And then what we're going to do is we're going to film an episode or record an episode from inside the apartment, and that'll be wonderful. We'll put a big sign. This guy won this apartment because he listened to Living L'Chaim. By the way, last year, the guy who won the apartment, he was living in Beitar Elite in a rental. Today, he's living in a beautiful apartment that he won from the raffle. He's a bus driver, guy who made Aliyah from Baltimore, Maryland, and today he owns a beautiful apartment because of the Dream Raffle. The next winner could be one of your listeners, Yaakov. LL coupon code, save $10, and get a brand new apartment that'll be yours forever.
Wow, thank you. Everyone joining is a winner.
You're welcome. I'm Yisrael Chai.
Let's pause before diving back in, and we're getting into the crux of the episode to talk about your future. If I'm honest, one of my biggest regrets is not attending a school as exceptional as Touro University's Lander College for Men. My brother Ellie did, and I saw firsthand how transformative it was for his career. Lander College for Men offers a dual curriculum that's rare to find. It combines rigorous Torah study with top-tier academics, so you don't have to choose between your learning and your future career. The academic options are extensive with over 20 major pre-professional tracks, including computer science, finance, pre-med, and political science, and there's something for everyone. Plus, Lander offers an incredible medical honors pathway, partnering with New York Medical College, NYMC, to give future doctors a streamlined path to medical school. And new this year is a dental honors pathway in partnership with Touro College of Dental Medicine. High-achieving students who know from the time they're in high school that they want to become doctors or dentists may be eligible for this direct pathway to medical or dental school. What sets Touro apart is their support system. They provide academic advising, tutoring, career services, mentoring, and access to a vast alumni network to help students land internships and jobs. What I love about them is their graduates consistently get accepted into top-tier graduate and professional programs, and many are currently working at Fortune 500 companies and major national firms. If you or someone you know is thinking about the next steps post-Israel, Come to Lander to see the campus and meet the dean, faculty, rabbeim, and students at the open house on Sunday, November 17th at 12:45 p.m. You can visit lcm.touro.edu/open house for more info and to register. Your future could start there. Yeah, it's amazing. And I personally, what I like so much about this and like my ability to be able to meet such cool people is like everything you described is like your experience in your life. And like, clearly that's what Hashem wanted. Like, we often think that like, oh, well, Rav Chaim Kanievsky, at least for guys, like, okay, that's the ultimate. And, you know, we hear that growing up and you should look up to people like him, but it wouldn't be right for me to try to be him. Again, we could say that's a good goal and that's nice, but I got to be the best me and you got to be the best you. And like, Hashem doesn't want you to be the classic Beis Yaakov girl, you know? Like, he wants you to be...
Clearly.
You know? No, like, he wants you
I got the message. It only took like 38 years.
That's wild. Has your children seen a change in you since going through like the past few years? I don't even know their ages. So they
my kids. I've got 4 boys,
Okay.
18, 16, 13, and 10, and a dog named Rosie. She hangs out with me a lot on Instagram. So my kids definitely, I mean, my oldest, I would say, for sure has seen like the most. He's kind of like, you know, he's like the wise, you know, my older two. But in a lot of ways, my home has remained the same. My values have remained the same. To get into like the nitty gritty of, you know, what you do in the yeshivish world in Israel versus, you know, America, there's different like customs. And there was definitely things that I did that I don't do. You know, I used to not wear open-toed shoes. Like there was things like that I, you know, kind of took as halacha. And at the end of the day, I had to figure it out for myself. I think that what my kids have seen, I hope, is, first of all, when they met my Korean family, they were like, they're awesome. And when we spent the summer with my parents, my adoptive family, they were like, you know, these are my favorite summers because we hadn't had that since before Corona, getting to spend like a lot of time with my parents. One thing that I read, and I really like it, is that kids can only expand as much as their parents have expanded. And I want my kids to be able, especially as boys, to be, you know, able to do the emotional labor that they need to do in life, to be connected and striving men in their marriages and in their personal and professional life. And so I think that I had to expand because I think I was keeping myself in this box of like, this is how you're perfect and this is how you show up. And I had sacrificed my self-identity at the expense of what I thought was the ideal community identity. And I hope I've shown my kids that like, you get to do it all. Like you get to be part of a great community. You get to, you know, be yourself. You get to bring your talents to this world. My friends have been so accepting. They named our WhatsApp group in the neighborhood the Chosen Ones because like Cho and like Jewish.
Okay, yeah.
And I've had like such great support, and I'm so happy that was what received. I think that also I was like that was the rejection. Like I thought I wasn't just rejecting parts of myself. I was also scared that like the community could reject me if I didn't play this like perfect role. And in the end, that's exactly what didn't happen. You know, my friends were more than accepting, and I've gotten so much support.
That's really beautiful. And I'm going to give a shout out to my aunt who told me, you always say that's really beautiful. So shout out to Michal. Okay, I'm very curious what your answers are going to be here. If there's one person from history, could be from the Torah, could be, you know, family related, that's no longer here. If you can meet them and speak to them for an hour, who would it be?
For sure, my mom.
What would you talk about with your mother?
Ugh, I might cry.
That's okay.
I think I'd want her to. I think I'd just want to be able to hear about her life. And I'd like to think that the way that I live my life is really, even though I'm not living, you know, there's the typical Korean life. And I missed out on a lot of the culture, and we're in the process of learning more. I think so many of our values overlap, and between the Jewish community and the Korean community. And I would just want to, I just want to know like how to continue making her proud. And I think I am. I do think that the way I live my life.
Yeah, you for sure are. You for sure are. Okay. I have tissues if you need tissues. Do you want tissue?
No, I'm good.
Oh, okay,
I'm
I was sure. Okay, a little lighter of a question.
Yeah, super light.
Yeah. So yeah, next one is besides for Tashlich, What are the other 612? I don't know if Tasha's even a mitzvah, but what out of the 613 mitzvahs, which is a mitzvah that you connect with maybe the most out of all of them?
I will say, it sounds so silly, but the idea of waking up and saying Moda'ani, and like from the moment that you wake up, like programming in your head to be like, this is what I do, this is my brain space, like that gratitude to me is setting the theme for your whole day, and it gives you an advantage, and it's just such an easy mitzvah for me to do, and I think that is just I would have to say that's probably like my favorite, and it's also like it's an easy add-on.
Right. No, it's great. It's great. Really, it's like starting the day the right way with the right mindset. Is there a story that happened in your life or that you heard or read or saw that gives you chizik, that gives you strength?
I think my life is like a series of amazing coincidences or hashgacha pratis. Like, why did my mom have to die? Why did I have to live in foster care? Like, everything always works out. But I feel there's like two tiny stories. So one is
Sorry, only one. No,
only one.
No, go. The floor is yours.
So when I was doing my conversion and I was living in Los Angeles and I was at this point of like, am I really committing to this? Do I want this Orthodox lifestyle? I remember one thing, even though I'd lived with this Jewish family, I had never heard the shofar. And one day I was walking down the street. I lived in Los Angeles on Detroit Street. And all of a sudden I heard the shofar. And I remember just turning to the person who was with me and I was like, why are they blowing the shofar now? Like, I knew it was the shofar, even though I'd never heard it. And I didn't know that there was a custom to blow the shofar through Elul. But I'd like to think, that at that moment, like kind of centered me in like, oh, you've heard this before. Like if we go back many, many lives. I'll say another thing that was like kind of this like spooky spiritual experience. Years ago, I had a son who was dealing with a really complex medical condition. And thank God today he's 200%. But one of the symptoms was actually that he would wake up in the middle of the night from 1 to 4 a.m. And initially they thought it was like seizures. In the end, it was like just a severe complex motor stereopathy, which is just a fancy way to say tics. It was due to response to a bacterial infection. It got really bad. And the doctors were like, we don't know what to do. And the only solution we have for you is Valium for your child. And I'm like, he's 18 months old. Like baby Valium is like these blue drops. I was like, I'm not so comfortable with that. And so we actually went to a Makobal, and he is Rav Banei Shmueli. He's by the Shuk. He's a student of Rav Sharabi. And we told him the story, like, what's going on here? It's been happening for months. The doctors don't know what to do. That night, every single night for 6 months, he slept through the night.
Whoa.
Yeah. And when that happened, like the first
Wait,
night,
what'd he do?
I have no clue. Nothing. There was nothing.
You just met with him?
We just met with him. We told him the name. And then we went to his, I think, son or son-in-law, who was his like assistant or gabbai. And he looked also at the name and he laughed. And like he chuckled. And he's like, Hakol Beseder. That night, he like for 6 months he slept through. In the end, we ended up having, it came back. But for 6 months, it was like just this like intense feeling of like, well, Hashem gave me a hug and everything's going to be fine. And also, I always remembered my husband saying that this Rav had kind of like chuckled, like everything's going to be fine. And when I look at this kid today, like he's just like such a great, 100% healthy, great sense of humor kid. And that reminds me oftentimes when we're going through something that seems like really crazy and, science should have had the answers, or I should have had a more clear path with science or whatever it is, whatever path you should have. Oftentimes there's something going on in the background. We don't know. And there's this just spontaneous healing, whether it's spiritual or mental or physical, whatever it is. And to open yourself up, I really believe in always leaving myself open up to that idea of spontaneity for those really good things. And remembering that centers me very much with that feeling.
That's really beautiful. Said it again. Okay, lastly, I want to just bring out a question about nutrition and then finish off with one question, because I believe we probably could have spoken for 3 hours about nutrition, but I got to bring it up. Like, it doesn't come up too often, and maybe it's like the American Jewish culture, but like and I know it's going to be hard to sum up a lot into one thing, but like nutrition, what do you want people listening, watching, what should they know? What do they need to know? Go.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
We could totally do. Can we do like an episode 2? This is my favorite topic to talk about because I think of nutrition as a tool. At the end of the day, when I'm working with clients, my whole thing is how do you feel your best energy? How do you show up to do your tafkid? How do I get you not to obsess about nutrition and just have these like awesome habits that support you so that those are automated and that you can do everything else that you need to do? Because we're not meant to spend our life dieting or obsessing about like supplementation or did I do my intermittent fasting hours enough? We're really meant to flow with all of the good activity that we can do. And so I think that if I would make one recommendation, and I think that this is something that is really important, especially for those living in a Western culture or in the United States, is the first thing that you can do is just basically eat more whole foods that don't come from a package. I say to my clients, if it comes from a package, even if it's organic, even if it seems healthy, even if it has like flaxseed and quinoa in it, it's a treat. And food processing and what they do is such a complex science. And we could totally, I mean, that's like a whole expose show and it's so fascinating. But really just getting down to the basics of nutrition and eating more home-cooked whole foods would be like a great place to start. Less packaged stuff, more real stuff.
Okay, I'm going to definitely have, if she's not already, have my wife follow you on Instagram because she will eat up everything you're saying. Okay, so for the last question, what advice, and I want you to think about it, what advice would you give to yourself if you could talk to yourself when you were like 17 years old, like going through that, like a lot of questions and trying to figure out your life?
That's such a good question because I'm actually going to do a speech to like that age group now. And
Oh,
that's
okay.
how I framed the talk in my head.
Okay, so then maybe you have the answer already.
The advice that I would give myself is this idea of like, make peace with yourself, with all the parts of yourself. No part of yourself is meant to like hurt you or be hidden. It's a tool. It has to be balanced and used in the right way. And the other thing I would say is that everything you see around you is a mirror. I believe very much, and use that to really understand yourself. You get really triggered by that person really bothers you. That event that just happened really sits in your head and hangs over you and you just want to tell everybody about it because it's just irritating you. It comes back to you. And if you learn how to read that map back to yourself, you become so powerful. You become so intelligent for yourself and you became very authentic.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nomi. And can't wait to see the Netflix show or whatever else.
Netflix. I'm thinking it's a comedy.
Okay.
The Jewish Korean merging.
I think it could be real
K-pop,
cool.
K-culture is super in now.
Oh, you know what? You reminded me. Your name.
Yes.
Originally Jessica.
Yeah.
Who chose your name? Why was that chosen?
Yeah. So Jessica, which I feel like technically it could be Sarah, right? Like some people translate Jessica to Sarah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Why? I don't know. But...
Right. And then Jessica is also in Hebrew, Yiska, which I was like, no, sounds like a sneeze. Labriut.
Someone named Yiska listening is crying right now after you said that. She's like, oh no. Don't worry, Yiska, you're cool. Don't worry. I'm going to get an email. But for you, it didn't make sense. I get it.
Yiska, DM me. We'll talk this out. And so I used to go over, I had this amazing rabbi in Rebbitzin, and when I was living in Los Angeles, Rabbi Elizabeth and Shimon Kraft. And I used to spend almost like all my meals at their house. And they were really like my family in LA. And we used to play Rummikub on Shabbos afternoons. You know, it's part of the conversion. Like you have to learn to play Rummikub on Shabbos afternoon. It's mandatory based in, and one day we were playing Rummikub and she goes, okay, Nomi, it's your turn. And she's like, I was like, huh? She's like, yeah, Nomi, fits. And that it just stuck.
What?
And that was it.
That's how
easygoing I am.
And you went with it? You're like,
I run with it.
Oh, okay.
Because I'm never like, I'm not ruminating. I'm just like, what feels right? And it felt right. And I do think I'm a Nomi. It does feel very
well. I would say but like it doesn't work like that. It's usually your parents know. But I guess when converting, it's up to you.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. Like, who technically, like, is it when someone's like, let's say, do you choose it? Do your adoptive parents choose it? Does your husband choose it?
The name, I think most people that I know who have converted, like maybe got some feedback, but they chose their name.
They chose it. Okay.
I even had a friend, actually, I remember she told me that she chose the name Talia, and the basin was like, no, something like more rabbinical, like not rabbinical, like something from Tanakh, like not like,
she's like, Yiska. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Amazing. Wow. Okay. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you so much.
Inspiration Gang, if you got this far, thank you. Thank you for hearing Nomi's fascinating story. Drop the word wow into the comments because that's the word I kept on saying in my head. Now, before I get to my closing words, I want to thank again our awesome sponsors. Thank you, Twillery, the best clothing, and they're having a massive sale now, so go check them out. Of course, use the code word INSPIRE for $18 for first order. Thank you, Dream Raffle. Use code LL on TheDreamRaffle.com for $10 off, and maybe you'll actually win the gorgeous Israel apartment. I have a good feeling about it. Thank you, Touro and Awesome School. So check them out on 11/17 at 12:45 p.m. And you can see more information in the show notes. And of course, thank you to the best software company I've ever known, BitBean. If you are smart and want to run your business smart, give them a holler. Oh, and yes, I'm so excited to announce L'Chaim Legacy. L'Chaim Legacy captures the story of a loved one creating a personalized episode, just like Inspiration for the Nation, but exclusively for your family. We dive deep, exploring experiences, values, and life lessons that will resonate for generations. So think if your grandfather, your father, your mother, someone has a story. Our team handles the research, crafts tailored questions, and uses a state-of-the-art studio with top editors to produce a truly special recording, all at a very fair price. So many people love this idea because L'Chaim Legacy preserves the heart of loved one's story for generations. And as time passes, family stories can fade, and with them, the values, wisdom, life lessons that define who we are sometimes, isn't there. We Baruch Hashem have the Torah, but we want to keep the personality and know about our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents. This personalized recording ensures that future generations not only know their family history, but feel deeply connected to the people who shaped it. It's a way to celebrate a legacy, honor life, and keep memories alive in a beautiful, lasting way. Great for a Hanukkah gift. Head to livingl'chaim.com/L'Chaim Legacy or the link in the show notes to apply and hear more. Now, Nomi's story reminds us that the search for truth and self-discovery isn't bound by time or place. Adopted into a loving family with no Jewish roots, she grew up with everything a child could want, but something inside her was unsettled, quietly searching for more. Today, as a Korean woman living an Orthodox Jewish life in Rehavia, Israel, Nomi embodies a journey of MS, a journey that teaches us the beauty of courage and self-acceptance. Her path shows us that it's okay to take our time to gather the courage and tools needed to truly find ourselves. It's a reminder that life isn't about where we start or how quickly we arrive. It's about the strength to keep searching, even if it means stepping beyond what's familiar. Nomi's journey encourages each of us to keep looking, to grow at our own pace, and to trust that with perseverance, we can uncover the truth meant for us. Remember, inspiration is everywhere. Oh, by the way, if you like this episode, go share it with people, the Olam, share it with the family. You know the drill. L'Chaim.
Living L'Chaim.